Ernest Hemingway, or Papa as he was called, loved Cuba, and the Cuban people loved him.
Cuba, que viva Cuba.
We're going to explore Ernest Hemingway in Havana, in Cuba, today. But first, this is Latina Literati. If you enjoy great books, interesting people from past and present, and places, then this is the channel for you. There is literally a Hemingway tour, or La Ruta de Hemingway, to enjoy while you're in Cuba. The greatest, or one of the greatest, of the American 20th century authors, you can follow in his footsteps. See where he partied, see where he lived, and see where he did his favorite activities, which included lots of sports. For over 20 years, Hemingway shared his love of Cuba with lots of visitors who would come to visit him in Cuba, including Hollywood stars. But let's begin at the beginning. Hemingway was part of a whole generation of writers and journalists who participated, fought, wrote about the First World War and the Spanish Civil War, and then kind of found themselves in Paris. They sometimes call it the lost generation, but if I got lost in Paris, I'd consider myself found. It is in 1926 that he publishes one of his great works, The Sun Also Rises. And it's about expats coming from France to Spain to run with the bulls in Pamplona en el Día de San Fermín. And so Hemingway loved the taurine traditions, todo lo que tenía que ver con toros. And so when you go to his house, you see posters and artwork, and of course the inspiration for one of his works, The Sun Also Rises, about the whole world of bullfighting. In 1929, Hemingway publishes A Farewell to Arms, which is the classic novel about Frederick Henry, an ambulance driver, lieutenant, who is working in the ambulance corps in Italy during World War I. So it's a story told in the first person, and this establishes Hemingway as a giant, a writer of huge stature on the international scene. And of course, because he participated in World War I, he lived it. And so it's very, very rich in detail. And of course, this is what establishes Hemingway as a writer that most college students, high school students in the United States at least, read Hemingway, at least one of his books. In 1928, and then again in 29, Hemingway visits Cuba for the first time. And he will stay with each visit longer and longer. He just envelops himself in Cuban culture and really loves being in Havana. When he's in Havana, he stays at a hotel called Ambos Mundos, which is very appropriate because it's kind of like two worlds. And he indeed was of at least two worlds. When you are in old colonial Havana, or La Habana Vieja, you can visit the hotel Ambos Mundos and go up to room 511. And it is in this room that has been kept the same since Hemingway used it. You'll see a typewriter where he wrote. You'll see pictures of him in different ceremonies. And it's really an amazing place. It transports you back, obviously, to the 1920s because everything, all the decor and everything has been kept the same. There are lots of watering holes near the hotel where he would stay. So you have Bodeguita del Medio, and you have La Floridita. And so there's a life-size statue of Hemingway in La Floridita where he would ask the bartender to double the rum and no sugar for his daiquiris, he said for his health. Hemingway and his then wife Marta rented a home from a Frenchman in 1939 and then purchased it from him in 1940. And so we visited Finca Vigia. It's just beautiful, picturesque, 9 acres around a home surrounding hills overlooking the city of Havana. So it's a very, very beautiful place. For over 20 years, Hemingway made this his home and his home base. And there are lots of stories about the visitors that would visit him at Finca Vigia. There's a swimming pool where they say Eva Gardner liked to swim, a lo natural. They say that Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir would visit him. They also say that Gary Cooper was too tall for the guest bed, so he had to sleep on the couch. So all sorts of people from Hollywood and also from other places around the world would come and visit Hemingway as part of their visit to Cuba. And it is here at Finca Vigia where he writes his definitive work, the work that has placed him in history. So his work, The Old Man and the Sea, is about an old man fishing for marlin in the sea. And they say that his own fishing boat captain, Gregorio Fuentes, was the inspiration for the old man in the book, Santiago. And so it is he publishes this in 1952. In 1953, he wins the Pulitzer Prize. And in 1954, he is awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. And you can see the fishing boat, his fishing boat, at Finca Vigia. It's called Pilar because you remember he loved Spain and the culture of Spain, and Pilar is the Virgin, the patroness of Zaragoza. And so he names his fishing boat Pilar. And you can see it at Finca Vigia. It's a beautiful boat, and he actually had a special bar put on it so he could take his bottles with him when he went out fishing for hours at a time. At Finca Vigia, there is a garage for his 3 automobiles. There's a guest house because he had 3 children and they would come to visit with their families. And then there's the main house. And in the main house, there's a guest room. So, of course, when you look in his library, you see just a hint of how many books he had. When he lived there, he had 9,000 books in his library. Doesn't that make your mouth water? 9,000 books to read. Amazing. And so you can see the house in Finca Vigia. Some areas are, like when we went, the dining room was being restored, so there was nothing in it. But the other rooms, you can see a lot of trophies from Africa, a lot of dead animals. And there was a rug where he would place his feet when he wanted to write. He said it was inspiration. It was very, it caused him inspiration. It kind of looked like water buffalo, but I didn't really ask. There's even a pet cemetery where there's a row of headstones for his dogs. He loved his dogs. And so in front of the boat, there is a line of headstones for his dogs. But the most amazing part of Finca Vigia for me was a baseball field that he had, and he would play baseball with the neighborhood kids, and he would call them Las Estrellitas. And almost 100 years later, kids are still playing baseball in that field that he provided so many, many years ago. So beautiful to see the children playing baseball where Hemingway played baseball. Hemingway was a sports enthusiast. He loved to swim, he loved to fish, he loved to box. And of course, he also enjoyed the local sporting events like cockfighting. It was a different time. And in fact, the first fishing tournament in the world is held in Havana. It is called the Hemingway Fishing Tournament in 1950. That's pretty amazing. I mean, that all these people would come to just celebrate his fishing abilities, even before he wins the Nobel Prize. Amazing. It is in Cuba that he receives the call from Stockholm that he has won the Nobel Prize, and the Norwegian ambassador presents the medal representing the Nobel Prize to him in Cuba, in Havana, and guess what he does? That's right, he turns around and presents it to the Cuban people. And he says, this medal belongs to the Cuban people, especially the fishermen with whom he spent a lot of time in an area called Kohima. So it is kept in the Cathedral of Havana until someone tries to lift it. and then it is kept safely in the Archbishop's residence or offices. There's a marina called Marina Hemingway, Hemingway Marina. There are statues of Hemingway throughout Havana. So there's a lot of ways that the Cuban people have commemorated Hemingway and his more than 20 years of enjoying and sharing with the people of Havana. No surprise about the book recommendations in this video. As a high school student, I read these works. I was part of an advanced placement English class and formed a book club with my English teacher. So this excess of reading started young. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to reread his great works as they approached their centennial. 100 years later, after they were written, how do we look at what he said and the ideas and thoughts he shared with us? So of course, I am absolutely sure that libraries in your area have Hemingway books, or your local bookseller, because we always want to support our libraries. We love our libraries and we love our local independent booksellers, and we want to support them. They are our neighbors and our friends. So I will have in the description box a list of his works, a line about what each of them is about, and of course links if you'd like to buy them from the independent booksellers listed in the links. So thank you so much for joining us on this adventure to the end of the video. We'd love you to subscribe to Latina Literati, and as always, we wish you mucho cariño, mucho salud y mucho amor. Gracias.